Hello, I'm Roberta Farion, Communications Associate at reVerb Communications.
I'm Glenn Kubish. I'm the creative lead. Welcome to the InfraSound podcast.
Somewhere around the 19-minute mark in our conversation with Georg and Larissa from design firm Dialogue here in Edmonton, we got to hear how you gauge the success of sustainable urban integration when it's applied to public infrastructure projects, say like the LRT. Listen to this non-designy answer.
I think it's just, do you like being there?
Did you enjoy your experience?
Enjoy experience, and it should not become a subjective, something, this is great architecture. It's really something that everybody can say, yeah, I like being here. I want to be here.
Now, our conversation about SUI, or sustainable urban integration, certainly included a lot more technical talk as well, but it's funny, it always kept coming back to real world ways in which people are invited to feel welcome in, to feel more at home in, to feel
like they fit in.
To feel that they want to be in
Totally.
These infrastructure projects.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We hope you enjoy this episode of InfraSound. And today we're going to be talking all things sustainable urban integration. And if you haven't heard that term before, I believe it's because these folks here coined it.
Maybe not quite us. I think we took it over from someone. It's probably 14 years old now. It started out at the very beginning of the Valley Line. It was called Southeast to West LRT back then. And what it is, it's maybe in a nutshell, it's just how to make our cities more livable, add vibrancy, and just support, especially City of Edmonton, in their quest for resiliency and sustainability.
Larissa, what lack or shortcoming was SUI developed to address?
Sure. So I think if we look at the existing Capital Line or Metro Line systems, the stations themselves are very, I'll say in some ways, utilitarian. It's really, people are meant to go from A to B and maybe not necessarily enjoy the experience. And when we had the Valley Line LRT, the first low-floor urban LRT in the city, you really want to enjoy the experience as it's directly in everybody's backyards. People are maybe lingering a little bit longer at stops. And, we have winter cities that are really long and cold, and yet adding a little bit more color and vibrancy and places people actually want to enjoy waiting and feel safe in. That kind of, I think, was the goal of SUI.
Yeah, it's all about being welcoming. I think that's what it comes down to, and so that the journey is not just from station to station, but it's a journey that leads up to going to the station. It's also for the ones that actually live along the corridor that might not be using the system that much, that for them it's an enhancement, it's not an impediment and a barrier or something that they would like to move away from. They would actually like to stay there. So it can be extended to any infrastructure project that is linear. I think that is an important part. So it's not necessarily meant for something vertical.
Oh, tell me more.
I think the vertical is actually well dealt with in general. It's be it through bylaws, be it through the involvement of urban designers, planners, architects, and I think that's the big difference. Whereas on the linear projects, it's engineers that implement them, and engineers, they're not necessarily trained in that aspect.
Actually, integrated is one of 4 key values that SUI stands for.
Well, then let's find out the other 3, shall we?
Pedestrians first. So we always want to look at pedestrian scale, human scale in general with these large mega infrastructure projects, and that could be passengers, passerbys, vehicles, and then people who live in the neighborhoods, as Georg mentioned. We've got integrated is one of the key values, so integrating into the communities. We've got flexible and adaptable, so not only integrating into the existing community, but also what might be the community in 25, 50, even 100 years. Actually, some of the design service life requirements on these projects are 100 years, so we don't know what is going to happen in 100 years just necessarily, but something that is able to adapt within our design. And then the last one is sustainable. So, there's so many things that go into sustainable, from landscape, could be stormwater management, or it could be, we've got different rating systems like LEED, and Vision is another sustainability rating system for linear infrastructure projects. Choosing materials that are long lasting and durable, but also add to the pedestrian experience.
Just when you talk,
if I may,
Oh, yeah.
just quickly on the sustainable, and it's not just the environmental sustainability, but it's also the other, I guess, pillars of sustainability, which are economical, has to make sense economically, and social, and some would actually go into cultural, maybe even political. And I mean, we're here in an office, you know a lot about that engagement. That's gets at, so that there's actual engagement when those projects are developed.
So I grew up in the Northeast End. I'm a Northeast Edmonton kid. Belvedere LRT station was where I spent a lot of time going back and forth to university. And that was what I expected from an LRT ride, going from A to B. My goal was to get to the journal and then hop on a bus and get to campus. Why is it important, and what changed so that what I experienced between A and B became as important as, or maybe important in a different way, as getting from A to B and back to B? Why are the letters S-U-I between the letters A and B in your alphabet?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think it's a good example as well, the northeast leg of the Capital Line, which is, there is a nice wide shared use path right next to it, but it's not really inviting, isn't it? It's just goes pretty straight, and you're next to a rail yard, basically. That's how you feel. So imagine now if there was some nice landscape, maybe some different paving in certain locations, all of that, how that would be way more conducive. Maybe you would have walked one day just from Stadium Station south because it's a nice day, and or the other way around. And I think that's what makes a difference. And then I think it will also attract more development around there. So you'll have more people, make it more lively, which makes the entire corridor just more livable.
And then, Valley Line, obviously the stops are a lot closer space, and that's all intentional so that people don't necessarily have to go from Millwoods to downtown. It is, I need to go to Millwoods. I'm just going to stop at Bonnie Doon Mall and just hop and get that black t-shirt I really wanted. Or, I'm just going to stop off at the Muttar to meet a friend for coffee. And then eventually I'll get downtown. But I think it just serves that multi-purpose, and riding it, I think it is great. I see people get groceries at the Safeway at Bonnie Doon, and then they just hop back on the train with their couple bags. And it just feels like a neighborhood LRT instead of like that commuter LRT A to B.
They will go shop for the groceries, hop on the train again, and then leave.
Could live the line more than just take the line.
Exactly.
I like that a lot. When I think about like effective communication for us, you don't just want to deliver a message to someone. You don't want to just take them from point A to point B. You kind of want to incite some curiosity, and it sounds like that's pretty much a guiding principle for this as well.
So who do you imagine, Larissa, maybe that you are serving with this SUI vision? How do you conceptualize the people on the other end of things? Are they statistics? Are they citizens? Are they members of the public? Why do they deserve an SUI experience, and who are they for you?
I'd say SUI is really for everyone, and obviously that's hard to design something for everyone. And a lot of it comes back to us as designers and working with architects, urban planners, landscape architects, you name it, and just trying to, what are mothers with children with strollers? What are elderly citizens? What are kids? What are just general families? And we try to think about all these people and how we can adapt our designs to best fit all. Obviously it's not perfect, but also we worked really closely with even anyone who has a visual impairment or hearing impairment, and how do we tailor our designs to these people through color contrast or audio visual differences. So I really think SUI is for all, and I'm trying to think the end of your question.
Why do they deserve?
I think everybody deserves a little bit of everything. I think I've been used this analogy for art that, everybody has different backgrounds and different accessibility to different things in life, but that shouldn't, hamper your experience any different than someone else, right? That if I have a whole bunch of money and I can enjoy a luxury experience, why do I get a different experience from someone who might be struggling a little bit more day to day? So I think it was just like an equal experience for all, regardless. And I think a lot of people actually think transit is for folks that might have a lower income. And,
Right.
People love getting in their expensive cars and driving A to B and parking in the parkades. But, by enticing them through this like equally valuable experience and it not being kind of that lowest denominator through kind of the cheapest, most convenient design, hopefully both entices anybody to use it, but also those folks that maybe normally would hop into their car and use it because they're like, wow, this is like just as equal or higher caliber.
I do love the North End, and you won't get me to disown my love of the North End. But going from Belvedere to Coliseum Station is not the same experience as going to Strathern Stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is that because of SUI?
I think it's part of SUI. It's probably also part of just in general how these corridors have evolved over the last years. More recognition in being less, just a separate guideway. That is very much was oriented on heavy rail, almost on freight rail. Obviously through that corridor, that's maybe to be expected. But I think that's also where then SUI originated because everybody saw that things were changing. Vancouver is a good example as well, where the SkyTrain just got more integrated, but it was still something missing, and that's where SUI originated on this project. Yeah.
When SUI kind of enters the conversation, who needs to be in the room? Is it city planners? Is it kind of engineers? Or like, how is this integrated into a project? It sounds like it kind of needs to happen fairly early on.
Yeah, we had a whole bunch of workshops early on, like all sorts of stakeholders and getting everyone to buy into it. And yet that doesn't happen if you have certain people missing, right? So maybe it's a bit of a struggle with some groups more so than others. The folks maybe perhaps that are more technical in nature were like, what is this fluffy SUI stuff? Why should I care, right? And that was really kind of bringing everyone on board. This is only going to work if everybody buys into it. If everyone wants to go off in their own little bubbles and do their design independently, that's not going to result in this cohesive design in these conversations that we need to have. So, I mean, Georg was involved a lot earlier than I was in the very, very early days, but then through even like procurement and the bringing on board of the contracting team, and then their team doing kind of that same engagement with their larger team and getting everyone on board because no one had ever heard of SUI. So I want to focus on the heavy front end loading of SUI and then hope that carries through. But like I said, you need to kind of like re-emphasize the need for SUI. But during construction is, I think, one of the changing points, right? Because you got a whole new different set of partners on board. You got contractors, subcontractors, people that just do their everyday thing. Oh, this is another sidewalk I'm building, or this is another station I'm building. But this is a whole new set of criteria that they don't know. So then we would actually go out to site and, making sure that our voices were heard and involved. And then also we have like SUI lead is actually a role both on the city owner's engineering side and then the design team side. And then even the construction side has an SUI leader, someone that's advocating and, is out there and connecting with the various groups and making sure it's top of mind for everybody. Otherwise, it does get lost. People are going to go out and build something, and then we're going to go out and say, that's not quite right, but we can fix it or mediate it in these ways. But ideally, if we were involved in upfront, we might have come up with a slightly different solution the first time around. But
it's actually very interesting. The question just triggered something. The really institutionalizing SUI came actually from the challenge that planners, they were always thinking about that. It always starts out with a vision somewhere and something grand. And so the transportation planners and the urban planners at the very beginning of the project, they think about that stuff. But then when it goes through the design, it gets more and more engineered. And they got lost. And so that was a big motivation, so that we have something that we create guidelines in parallel to the technical guidelines that existed already, but we created the SUI guidelines and just to carry that through.
it's not quite a picture book, but it's essentially a picture book where we did a bunch of illustrations, both, found online, but also of personal travel journeys. And we marked each one of these up of what was a good example or a bad example, or even within the same image, something that was, I forget, what were the terms we used?
We used desirable and undesirable.
Yeah, we had to be intentional with the terms we used. That anybody could pick that up and kind of get a sense of like, okay, well, if this is what they think is undesirable, we stay away from that, and then we try to trend towards those desirable features.
It's very interesting. That was something we didn't know how that would turn out. We had at the end some of the most unlikely engineers being the biggest advocates.
Really?
So it was really interesting. Yeah, and it's the fun part about it. I think the engineers, when they're not exposed to it, they wouldn't think about it. But they're generally smart people, and you explain things to them, they see it, and then all of a sudden they start living it. And that was actually one of the great experiences.
Okay, so this is kind of like out of left field, but I'm hoping you guys are ready for it. We're all warmed up now. So I read an interesting book a few years ago about kind of the art of elegance in design, and it came down to kind of these 4 factors. It was subtraction, symmetry, seduction, and sustainability. And from what I can see so far, you guys have sustainability built right into the name, have kind of principles that are symmetrical to, other teams that are already operating on these projects. So just to see if you guys can go 4 for 4, do you have kind of subtraction worked into it, like simplifying things down to kind of make things more efficient? And then how do you incorporate seduction to, sustainable urban integration?
So subtraction, I think we can do that.
So you're taking seduction.
yeah, I have to take seduction here. And it's for me as a structural engineer, I think it's most obvious there. A structure, the simpler it is, the better it works. And I think it's when you look at also the structures along the Valley Line, for example, they are not complex or complicated. They're pretty, straight lines. The bridge over the river is certainly not a simple bridge from an engineering standpoint, but if you look at it, they're straight lines. There's nothing, there's no additional, weight on it or anything. It's a bridge. That's what it is, and I think that is absolutely true. I think simplify is important, and we had that conversation about the landscaping is a big part of SUI. And in there, I think there's room to grow for us to make it simpler, because it's if it gets too complicated, it's hard to maintain. You got weeds everywhere, doesn't work either. So having those conversations up front, and that's a little bit of a learning that we need to or can do a better job maybe.
Landscaping, room to grow. I see what you did there. That was very elegant itself.
And then seduction.
Oh, yes. Seduction. As Georg was talking, I thought, what is sexy about the Valley Line, apart from everything? I think two examples came to mind. I think one of which, maybe it's not seduction, but this is where my brain went, so stay with me. On the overhead catenary system, or the OCS poles, the existing Capital Line and Metro Line systems, the supporting arm of them is just a straight metal shape that creates like a V. And we came up with what I think would be seductive, I don't know, but it has a curve to it. So even just like a simple shape change, I feel like adds to the elegance or maybe the seduction of those OCS cantilever structures. Maybe not the best example, but
no, I think that's really close to kind of like what the idea is. Okay. Is that like there are these things that are just alluring to a person. You kind of want to lean in or stop and appreciate it, or maybe it's there and you feel good about it.
How do you gauge the success of SUI with people like me?
I think it's just, do you like being there? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, did you enjoy your experience?
Yeah, enjoy your experience, feel welcome, and then that's it. And it should not become a subjective, something, this is great architecture because of that and that and
that's
that.
What I mean.
Yeah, I don't think that's the goal at all. It's really something that everybody can say, yeah, I like being here. I want to be here.
Can we zoom in a bit and maybe talk about take us somewhere on the Valley Line Southeast line that that shows SUI in action?
I would start with the vehicles. I would start right there.
Oh.
So it's getting in from almost the sidewalk height, getting into a vehicle that's very open, big windows. You can see out, you see everything. I think that's where it starts. The colors are nice, and we shouldn't take too much credit for that. Actually, us on the initial design team, because it was really the supplier Alstom that came up with a lot of the implementations. We had some guidelines for them what to do, but how they implemented it, and I think they did a good job. And
Even in addition to the vehicles, when you're on the Davies Elevated Guideway or the South River Valley Elevated Guideway sections, we didn't anticipate the contractor using a trough girder, which is a kind of big tub-shaped section. It's different than what you see now being built on the Valley Line West, where they actually have a box girder where the train runs kind of at the top of the surface. But we actually, as part of our design requirements, required that the track level through those trough girder sections of the guideways were so that the windows were parallel with the top of the most highest structural element, so people still had views out. We didn't want people to feel like they were driving through almost like a tunnel-like environment when you're on the guide, but you really wanted people to be up and above the structure and experience. It's all baked in.
Intriguing.
I have one example right now. It's maybe not that small, but every platform, when you get off the platform, you get down that what's called a sloped walkway, and then there's an area that we call a refuge area, but it actually is a refuge area. You stand there, you wait for the light to turn green to cross the road, but you're in there and you feel safe. There's some bollards, there's delineation, it's flat, it's all of those things, and generally you would just be standing there, not even think about it probably, but just pay attention quickly.
That's big for you, that you're not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
It just fits.
Yeah.
Feels right.
Or public art, I think, is another one too that I spent a long amount of time with the Edmonton Arts Council and each of the artists selected, and that was all integrated art. It goes into the glass components and then into various structures, and again, art sparks a lot of great conversations, and I think those are another fun thing. Usually, maybe those are the first things that people might point out was part of the SUI design team.
Are there any other notable projects, not necessarily here in Edmonton, but things that are, the public would know that integrate this or kind of embody the similar values that SUI does?
Well, we took quite a bit of inspiration from Seattle when we started out. They opened in about 2013, I believe, a new LRT. They didn't have an LRT at all, and they did a really good job on their first leg from the airport to downtown. And in terms of how they had they have a section along Martin Luther King Boulevard that is at grade, but it's really nicely integrated. It really fits into that neighborhood. The stops there are, the size is the right size for that neighborhood. They then have to go onto an elevated portion with an elevated station, but also that station is not grandiose, and it just fits in. And their elevated guideway that they did, we took some inspiration of their piers and everything. So I think Seattle did a really good job, and they're regressing right now just because of financial or they call it financial constraints, and they're building out their systems so fast, it's probably not really that well coordinated anymore. So as a structural engineer, I really liked how they formed their piers on the elevated guideway, how it went on into the what's called the diaphragm of the superstructure. So it was all really one nice motion, and we did the same a little bit with a different shape. But the one detail that they did that really worked well, because those piers are actually massive, they're big piers, they're 3 by 3 meters, so it's a big thing. And but what they did, they had a little recess right in the middle of the pier on both sides, that first of all it made the pier look not as massive when you just looked at it from the side, because you got actually like 2 piers. But it also, what it did, they could integrate any rainwater leaders or their so-called standpipes for fire suppression have to go on into that recess, and it's nicely embedded in there, and we plagiarized that detail. Yeah, so
Where would you find that on this line?
every single pier on the elevated guideway.
No way.
Yeah, just have to look at the piers and look from the side, and then you realize all of a sudden, wait a minute, this looks like two smaller piers that are sitting next to each other, so it's not as massive. And then you see also those rainwater leaders. They're not on every pier coming down, but where they're coming down, they're nicely in that recess. There's also other good examples in the States, especially, that tried to get the European. I mean, that's where it comes from. When you go to France, for example, you go to those cities, and the smaller ones. I'm not talking about Paris, but you go to Toulouse or so. Their systems are so integrated. They run through downtown so smoothly, like they're not there even. So
Wow, the ultimate success.
yeah, the ultimate
it's
success.
Not there.
It's not there. It's just part of it. Everybody
Right.
still crosses the road, and then when one of these vehicles come, they just stop crossing the road and all of it. So, but there's some cities in the States as well. They really tried. Minneapolis is a good example as well. They tried very hard. Yeah, and we took some inspiration from there as well. Yeah.
Honest question. Why doesn't sustainable urban integration just happen?
Early phases of these projects, we've got a lot of urban planners, landscape architects and such, and they have that vision, and it does get eroded over time. But if you bake in SUI as something that kind of carries that vision forward and it makes it contractual, then you can live it out throughout the length of the project versus it being eroded for cost or schedule reasons. I feel like that's one of the bigger driving factors. So when we had it explicitly written into the contract that thou shalt do X, Y, Z, and then you can push back on the contractor of like, well, you can't do this because it doesn't meet the contract, and we can uphold that. And again, it's what they cost at the beginning, and we actually held them to a lot of almost visual requirements, renderings and such, that they said, this is the station, it's going to look like this. And we said, okay, well, now build it, make it look like this. And I actually think that's one of a cool thing too on Valley Line, is that you can take a lot of our renders that we saw from TransEd partners and you compare it to what was built. It's close.
Mm-hmm. But I think one of the reasons maybe why it's not doesn't just happen
Right.
is a little bit, I don't know, if just to compare, if you're used to, for example, you're always eating bland food, that's okay. You're used to it. You eat it, it's okay. There's nothing that would trigger you to do anything else, and then all of a sudden you get to this real great Indian restaurant, and you get just something with a lot of flavor and all of that, and then so I say, oh, wait a minute, this is different. This is what I would like to do. So I think many people are not aware that they could have it better, and some might think that's okay. It doesn't matter, but there are other people that you want to attract to a city that they might look at it and say, yeah, no, that's not where I want to live. So I think that's just what has to trigger.
Is there a question about SUI that you just wish people would ask you, or is there something that you hope that they just understand? Like, what's a key takeaway for you guys?
I'm not saying it's not more cost, SUI. I think it is. On every project, you will add a certain increment, but that increment is minuscule compared to the benefits that you'll get. And I think that's also one of the conversations that should be had, and maybe actually should be researched a little bit. So again, if you can attract more people to live in your city, that's probably a good thing, for many reasons. I mean, you get a tax base that's higher, but you just get more business done and all of it. So I think just all of that, and maybe just looking at that a little bit, it would be interesting to see around the world, why are certain areas growing and others not? Or sustainable urban integration could be Walterdale Bridge.
So
with I don't know if you've ever noticed, but the light poles standards that they have along that's Walterdale Hill Road, I think, the one that comes from the west, and I think they also have them on Queen Elizabeth Road. So changes already. They're a little bit different. They're a little bit, they're just feel you a little bit better. It's a white bridge. If you are a pedestrian, there's a really, really nice shared use path on the downstream side and all of that. And that bridge certainly costs more than what could have been done. Could have had what we call a girder bridge, 4 piers in the river, whatever it is. That would have been less, but it's already made a huge difference within Edmonton.
Everybody uses that image.
Everybody does, exactly.
Everybody does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I love driving under it. I look up and, I look out. It's a beautiful view. It's especially when you're entering like the chaos of like downtown and whatnot.
Exactly,
It's like,
yeah.
man, this is a really nice last sense of peace.
How big, how small does SUI sharpen your focus?
We go right down into the details. Sometimes
Really? Give me an
people
example.
wonder, like, why do they care about these things?
What's an example?
So I think one example that comes to mind on Valley Line Southeast would be even, again, it's on the overhead catenary poles.
You
but
like those?
I love those
Yeah.
poles, but I've advocated for them for so long. So after we went through the design of the lovely curved cantilever arms, and then all of a sudden you have to strap all these components to it. We've got different signals. We've got different, I don't know how many things they have to put ID signs on, or like this is the ID sign for this component, and here's another ID sign, and we'll just strap them all on with a little band. And I'm like, can this not be more intentionally done? Can we do less bands? Because if you look at any pole around the city and you actually see how things are fixed to it, either it was intentional and there's not this banding impact. But once you get a pole with like 20 or so bands on it, it just looks different than a band, 1 or 2 bands per pole. So I think even just something as simple as signage. What's another one? I feel like even on the stop platforms, we were big advocates of like that final concrete finish. I'm not sure anyone else would appreciate so much, but the concrete crews did like an awesome job at the end of the day where they did a sack rub finish and just blended all those imperfections away through it, like bug holes or other kind of form liner imperfections that perhaps could have just been. But I mean, I ride the LRT frequently, and I look at those concrete edges. I'm like, wow, they just look so much better this way. So perhaps those are, I don't know if they're small, but
Yeah, there's
smaller. I
there's
can think
good
of one, actually. I looked at it the other day and I almost forgot that it was such a controversial topic at the time that people are like, why are we doing this? I'm like, someone's going to see this one day and care about it. So when you're on the Davies Elevated Guideway, heading either northbound or southbound, because it's a center loading platform, the tracks actually split when they enter the station. And so when the tracks split, there's actually a little gap between the two trough girders that we had to close off. And they were just going to put this blunt wall or railing, and I was like, this doesn't look integrated. So we actually came up with, almost looks like a cattle guard. It's actually more rounded, and the railings kind of go in a nice hook shaped pattern, and it just feels softer, and it felt more integrated, especially on paper. But now I just look at it and wonder, maybe no one would have really paid that much attention to it, but now I see it and just had to smile and almost give it a little bit of a laugh the other day. It wasn't a whole lot of design and effort, but it was just something that took a little bit more intention behind just the pragmatic approach of, oh, we'll just take this detail and just slap it on here.
It just sounds like it has so much better flow. Just
It does.
hearing you describe that, it's like, well, no, it's way less jarring. Good job.
And you asked before, is there a stretch maybe that you could explain SUI? And I think one of the better stretches would be to start somewhere in Louis McKinney Park, go over the bridge or under the bridge, whenever taking the shared use path, and then going to the Mutard stop, and because you see different things, you see the trail connection and everything. But when you get to the Mutard stop, there is the ramp that's coming down from getting over that's 98th. The ramp that's coming down, and it's got a humongous guardrail. If you look at how that is finished and how then it goes over into the pedestrian realm, because there's a crossing right there. You have to cross for the platform, and just how that's done, and you just look at it, there's little details that just, if you take a little bit of care, because we had to make some adjustments to it during construction, and it made a huge difference.
What does the evolution of SUI look like? If you're looking 50 years down the road, what would you like to kind of see added to this practice, or see how it evolves?
That's a very, very good question. There's always refinements that one would like to see, but it's certainly also, it's more even that it spreads out into other areas of the city as well. So that within Edmonton, but then into other cities, that it just spreads and it's something that we really just do. We don't need guidelines anymore. We know what it is. That
It just happens.
It just happens, and that would be ideal. And Larissa mentioned there's a rating system. It's called Envision, and that rating system is for mostly linear infrastructure, or it's not for a building, it's for anything else. And just starting to apply that, because it's got a lot of really good questions that they ask and to do, and it goes back to what sustainability is. It's not just environmental, but it's also the economical, the social, and all of that. And just something, it would be great if the city of Edmonton started to apply that.
What do you mean by financial sustainability?
Yeah, certainly not waste public resources, but then actually attracts business. I think that's what it is. That's what it comes down to. So that we build things in quotation marks that then enhance that environment, so that there's more businesses there. There's just more happening around it.
Where does public engagement and voices from the public, where do their voices find a place in the whole process? The non-experts.
A lot of the public engagement and consultation done on Valley Line, there were a lot of options presented to the public and then feedback received and then implemented. I really do hope so. One example, actually, I think a good example would be the Watanow Bridge. So there were different design options, some of which were just kind of like a simple girder bridge. I think there was maybe a truss option at some point. I don't know. Various options. And, the public was able to express their opinions on what they felt was best. And then we carried that forward through the preliminary design. And then, that's ultimately that was the option that was built.
Yeah, and it's certainly, it is presenting options. And obviously, we're not quite unbiased when we're presenting the options that happen. So that's then a check that is important to make. And for us, when we come from the design side, that's when then the public engagement experts are important. So, well, looks like I have a bit of a bias. This render is just shinier than
Right.
this one here, and things like that. So that we stay objective, but really show the possibilities. Yeah.
And so how do you present information to the public so that it's meaningful, so that they can really make the right choices when deciding what's going to work in their area?
Yeah, and that's maybe one of the lessons learned actually from the engagement that we did early on, that we would present options without us thinking through, okay, how are those perceived, by the public? What can they do with it? So I think the options that need to be presented are options where the public can actually they have the enough information that their imagination then knows that that's what it's going to be. And it's also sometimes you can't take shortcuts. You can't just example noise walls. I can give you 3 examples of noise walls. They all look different, and then you can say they're great, this is not so great, or whatever. But maybe all 3 are not so great, actually. So I think you have to do some research. How can you actually improve on that, and how can you make that better, and so that the public has the information that they can work with, and that they have enough information so that with their imagination, because it's not there yet, obviously, you need to use a bit of imagination that they can get there.
Along the corridor, we actually broke up the entire alignment into various character zones, and then within each character zone, we have opportunity areas. So within the contract, we put terms to each of those of what the limits were, what the representative communities were, to try and tease out a little bit of flair. Some communities adjacent to each other might be very similar, whereas other areas you actually kind of go through segments where there's a drastic or more drastic difference because of just kind of what the history is in that area.
What's an example?
I'm trying to think of the best. I don't know.
Well, I think the Southeast is a good example, because we've talked about Davis before. Davis is clearly an industrial zone. You come from a very, very mature, somewhat I've maybe called it suburban before, but urban environment in Strathern, and you go down Bonnie Doon, You get a little bit into newer developments, but it's very established. Then you get into something completely different once you're across Argyle Road into this industrial. You hit that until you're at Whitemud Drive, and then you get into the more suburban areas. So these are really 3 to 4 distinct, just urban realms, and they can respond differently to them.
Would I be happier applying SUI principles to my own life?
My brain went first to the approach of decluttering. I'm like, I like less. Less is more sometimes. So I
Right.
think that's one of the SUI with the integrated option. I think even the pedestrians first, you could put a spin on it. I think I'm naturally such an empath, but I think even just my approach through life has always been, people are doing their best and trying to always look for the good in people first. And I think that is like pedestrian first, treating every human, equally instead of, some people are a little quicker to judge than others. But I don't know, that's how I would spin a couple of those key values and how I live my daily life. I'm not sure all of them, sustainable is one too, obviously. We can all recycle a little bit more, create a little less waste, and find all these other ways. But I actually think the pedestrians first one is one that perhaps I feel like I could live, or I am living by, but in a slightly different spin.
Nice.
Yeah, it might be sounding like David Staples now, but I think just when you start taking care of your own health and the environment you live in, you become more just happier. And I think that's something that he's advocating hard now, and I think he went through that, and yeah, if you can live it, if you can do it, that'd be great. I don't know how you would get somebody there, though. That's a different question. I think it has to come from inside.
The inertia would just continue,
exactly.
You would in the same direction.
Somehow you would have to show that there's different ways, and again, it's kind of like going to the Indian restaurant. Maybe then, oh yeah, this is better.
Tell us a little bit about what dialogue brings to the table.
Yeah, I think in terms of SUI, maybe what distinguishes us is that we are a truly integrated design practice. And what do I mean by that? It means like we talk we as engineers, more from the structural engineering side, we talk daily to architects, to urban planners, urban designers, to mechanical engineers, to electrical engineers. So we interact constantly. We understand each other, and I think we can then translate also those different languages that exist, and we've learned those languages, to speak those languages, and through that, as I mentioned before, an LRT corridor always starts out with a grand vision. It always does, from the planners and all of that. But I think what we can help with is actually pull that through in a reasonable manner. Whereas in other designers that are as competent, as good as we are, but they're very often they're a little bit more siloed. And so they see their discipline, their whatever typology that they're doing, that's the important part, and don't really understand what's going on to the left and to the right of them. And I think that's where we're different.
I love that. Well, Georg, Larissa, thank you so much for joining us today. I certainly hope that sustainable urban integration becomes a larger part of Edmonton's identity, because I think, we would all be better for it. So thank you for enlightening us. And a thank you for watching and listening. If you liked what you saw and want to give us a like, write a review, we're off to prepare the next edition of InfraSound.